The wood-paneled courtroom was silent, save for the faint scratching of reporters, pens and the hum of cameras waiting for action. It wasn't just another day in Washington, D.C., this was a hearing that promised fireworks. The room was packed with attorneys, activists, journalists, and curious citizens. Everyone knew that sparks were about to fly. At the center of it all sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, her expression calm but sharp, the way a seasoned litigator prepares for crossfire. She had been called to testify on a controversial legal matter involving voting rights, one that cut deep into the nation's political conscience. And across from her, like a predator waiting to strike, sat Senator Ted Cruz. His eyes were cold, his body language stiff with determination. Cruz had built a reputation for turning hearings into battlegrounds, and today, Jasmine was his target. Congresswoman Crockett, Cruz began, leaning forward with a smirk, "You've spoken passionately about protecting voting rights. But isn't it true that your proposals would, in fact, weaken election integrity?" A ripple of murmurs traveled across the courtroom. Cruz had thrown his first punch. Jasmine tilted her head, unbothered. She knew this tactic: attack first, confuse the audience, and hope the witness stumbles. But she wasn't about to give him that satisfaction. "Senator," she replied, her voice steady, "what weakens election integrity is suppressing lawful voters. What I'm fighting for is simple: that every American, regardless of zip code, has the same access to the ballot box. If you call that weakening, I'd suggest you revisit the Constitution you swore to uphold." The audience stirred. Some gasped, others chuckled softly. The tension thickened. Cruz narrowed his eyes. "Don't lecture me about the Constitution, Congresswoman. You're talking about expanding power for your party, plain and simple. Isn't it true that you've consistently sided with policies that would allow fraud to run rampant?" That word, fraud, hung in the air like smoke. It was a heavy accusation, one designed to wound her credibility. Reporters scribbled furiously, waiting for Jasmine's reply. She leaned forward, meeting Cruz's glare without blinking. "Fraud. Senator, do you know how many confirmed cases of voter fraud there were in the last election? Out of over 150 million votes cast. Fewer than 2 dozen. You're more likely to be struck by lightning than to see voter fraud change the outcome of an election. But you already know that. You keep repeating the word not because it's true, but because fear helps you hold on to power." The gallery erupted into whispers. The judge struck her gavel. "Order. We will maintain decorum in this courtroom." Cruz's face reddened. He wasn't used to being challenged so directly, especially not in such a public, high-stakes setting. He shifted in his chair, recalibrating. "Ms. Crockett," he pressed, "are you accusing me of deliberately misleading the American people?" The moment was electric. The question was bait. If she said yes, she risked making a sworn accusation against a sitting senator. If she said no, she might look weak. The court held its breath. Jasmine folded her hands calmly. "Senator Cruz, I don't need to accuse you of anything. The record speaks for itself. What I will say is this: misleading the American people has consequences. Not just for you, not just for me, but for democracy itself. That's why we're here today." The words landed like a hammer. Even Cruz hesitated. Cameras zoomed in, catching the flicker of discomfort on his face. But then, he struck harder. "Let's cut through the rhetoric. Isn't it true that your so-called reforms would give criminals, illegal immigrants, and people who shouldn't be voting the right to cast ballots? Yes or no?" This time, the courtroom gasped audibly. Cruz's attack was brutal, and all eyes turned to Jasmine. She knew this was the moment that would decide not just the hearing, but possibly her political career. She adjusted her microphone, leaned forward, and said. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. The weight of Cruz's accusation pressed down on the room like a storm cloud, but she sat tall, her hands folded neatly on the desk before her. "Senator Cruz," she began slowly, her voice carrying across the courtroom, "I want to make something crystal clear. No reform I've ever supported gives criminals, non-citizens, or anyone not legally qualified the right to vote. That's a lie. And you know it." A hush spread across the chamber. No one had expected her to call it out so bluntly. Cruz leaned back, pretending amusement. "So now you're accusing me of lying, Congresswoman. That's bold. But it won't save you. Because I happen to have documents here." He held up a stack of papers theatrically, waving them toward the cameras, "that suggest otherwise." Reporters craned their necks. Photographers clicked wildly. This was the moment Cruz had been waiting for, to corner her, to create the impression of guilt before she could respond. But Jasmine Crockett had come prepared. Before Cruz could even read a single line, Jasmine reached into her briefcase and produced a folder of her own. Calmly, she slid it across the table toward the judge. "Your Honor, I'd ask that the court review these exhibits immediately," she said. "They prove that what Senator Cruz is holding in his hands is not only outdated, but deliberately altered." The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, and even a few shouts echoed against the wooden walls. The judge frowned and gestured for silence. A clerk quickly collected both Cruz's stack and Jasmine's folder, delivering them to the bench. Cruz's confidence wavered. "That's absurd. These came straight from official sources." "Really?" Jasmine interrupted sharply. "Because what I just handed over includes sworn affidavits from state officials, timestamps, and verified digital copies that show exactly when your documents were manipulated. The differences are glaring. Anyone can see it." The judge scanned the files, her brows knitting tighter with every page. Then, with a sharp rap of the gavel, she looked up. "Senator Cruz," the judge said sternly, "these documents you presented are indeed inconsistent. At best, they're outdated. At worst," she paused, eyes narrowing, "they've been deliberately doctored." The room exploded. Reporters leapt to their feet. Cameras flashed like lightning. Cruz's face flushed crimson. "This is outrageous," he barked. "I will not sit here and be smeared by a political opponent." But Jasmine wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. "No one smeared you, Senator. You did that to yourself. You came into this courtroom trying to paint me as dishonest, trying to paint millions of American voters as criminals. And in doing so, you revealed something about yourself, that you're willing to mislead, distort, and even fabricate to get what you want." Silence. Her words landed with the weight of a gavel. Even Cruz seemed momentarily speechless. His hands trembled slightly as he shuffled his papers, trying to salvage his composure. Then Jasmine stood. Her tone shifted, not just a defense, but a declaration. "Let the record show," she said firmly, "that truth is not a weapon of convenience. It's the foundation of justice. And when elected officials attempt to tear it down, whether through lies, or intimidation, or fraudulent evidence, the people deserve to see it exposed. Not just in this courtroom, but across the country." The gallery erupted into applause before the judge could even call for order. Cameras zoomed in on Cruz's scowling face, his once sharp attack now crumbling into embarrassment. And then came the shock no one expected. The judge set her papers down, her voice steady but unmistakably firm. "Senator Cruz, based on what has been presented here today, I am referring this matter to the appropriate ethics committee for further review." The courtroom went dead silent. Reporters froze, pens hovering in midair. Staffers looked at one another in disbelief. Even Cruz's own aides seemed stunned. Cruz opened his mouth to object, but no words came out. For the first time all day, he was powerless. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, simply adjusted her blazer, collected her notes, and sat back down with quiet composure. She hadn't just defended herself, she had turned the attack into a stunning reversal, one that could ripple across Washington for weeks to come. As the judge adjourned the session, the room erupted into chaos once more. Questions shouted, cameras flashing, people pushing to get closer to Jasmine as she rose to leave. But she didn't stop to bask in the moment. She walked steadily toward the exit, her expression calm, her stride unwavering. And Ted Cruz. He remained frozen at the table, the smirk gone, his reputation now hanging in the balance. What happened next had shocked the court, and the nation.